Welcome back to the MMA Creators Podcast, episode number 107. Now, last night we, of course, had the UFC Fight Night. Thankfully, not in an empty Apex Center. Instead of one of a raucous crowd, 1,000 strong, headlined by one Kamaru, the Nigerian Nightmare, Usman, and Joaquin Numanza Buckley. And I don't think we ran our official predictions on here, on that card specifically, but I will say, and be the first to say, that I got it very wrong. I thought, judging by patterns and what we tend to see in this sport and in this game, and how unceremonious it is, how culling and brutal it can be, that age would play a huge factor, and Joaquin Buckley would get a brutal finish with his explosive power, and Usman's age creeping into their late 30s. But that proved to not be the case, and I think what we saw, at least from my amateur perspective, was a case of real veteran know-how, let's say, good fight IQ, willingness, and I guess knowingness, I'd say, that your skill sets aren't what they used to be, and relying on what you can use at that older age. And those, as your body starts to deteriorate, just stick to what you're good at, what's fundamentally worked for you over a long period of time. And that is, of course, Kamaru's wrestling. And obviously there's all this talk about his knees and, you know, him being vulnerable to those leg kicks, and Leon Edwards had some success with that in years gone by, but it wasn't an issue there on Saturday night. It was pretty dominating. Not a lot of striking shown on the feet, and when it was, he clearly seemed a little bit more labored, a little bit slower, as we would have expected. But Joaquin had absolutely no answer. It really impressed me, surprised me, and impressed me.
Yeah, it's an impressive win if you think about it. Being a 2-year layoff. The last fight being Hamzat Chimaev at middleweight on short notice, by the way. So very impressive.
October 2023.
That Volk and I know I was there. Volk and Kamaru Usman back in the win column. What an incredible year for mixed martial arts and the aging populace within the sport. But aside from the fact that it was just impressive to get a win, I think you hit the nail on the head. It was the veteran savviness that got him that win. I don't think we saw him necessarily show any wrinkles that we haven't seen before. I don't think we necessarily saw anything spectacular. And I don't mean that in a scathing way, just nothing really stood off the page. But what did was just how he was able to navigate the rounds, how he was able to secure positions, how he was able to wind the clock down but do a good amount of damage and secure good top position and heavy pressure. And it was very impressive. And we didn't do our predictions, but I didn't tell you this a few weeks ago, or maybe I did tell you this. I did. In last week's episode, I got invited to this creators league, if you like, of predictions.
And yes. Yeah.
Back in the day, I used to break down every card, study the records, look at the patterns, look at the tape. So I'm not quite as on the ball as I used to be. So I'm never as confident with my picks now as I was back in the day. But ever since I've been added into this league, I've been absolutely flying. Absolutely flying. And I've taken first space again for about the third or fourth week on the spin. So I had Usman decision, I had Rose decision, I had Shabazian decision. So it all looked pretty much how I thought it was going to. The undercard was actually quite a lot more fun than the top of the tree, I thought.
Yeah, right. I agree. I think we probably should have started there, if anything. And I think the logical place to go with that is, of course, a new, fresh name on most people's minds, and one probably not known to the casuals, but I think he will be very soon. Malcolm Wellmaker with, I think it's his third right hook knockout in a row, which, you know, might be telling of his game plan going into most of his fights. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I feel for one man in that fight, and that was his opponent, Chris Moutinho, who has been dealt probably the hardest hand of any UFC fighter in history. And if you don't know, he once fought Sean O'Malley on like a couple of days' notice for his UFC debut, where he got beaten around pillar to post for just under 25 minutes. Here, it only took 2 minutes for him to get flatlined. And Malcolm Wellmaker, he had a finish over Cameron Saman as well, of course, highly touted out of South Africa. So, you know, with those two in mind, that's two big scalps on his resume. I know Chris Moutinho doesn't necessarily have the fighting pedigree to compare to, but, you know, the finish speaks for itself, right? And we're talking about a guy who is actually 31, so he hasn't got a huge amount of time left to climb this sport. And, be a champion in his prime. So I think the UFC are going to push him quite quickly. They know how impressive and exciting his skill set is, and in an era where we need stars and people who have that proper punching power, I think he fits that bill to a T at one of those lighter weight classes. So very, very excited to see where he goes next. I couldn't give you a name off the top of my head, but honestly, run him a like just outside the rankings fight, maybe a top 15 fight. I'm all for it. Why not? I like a bit of fast tracking. Sometimes it blows up in the fighter's face. Francis Ngannou, most infamously, as I of course I'm doing the video of him. But I'm a sucker for it sometimes. I'm a sucker for storylines. We all know this game's never about principle anymore. It's about entertainment. And I want Malcolm Wellmaker to be fighting the very best as soon as possible.
Yeah, there's a few things to this, because the first thing that I'll have to say is, I said on last week's episode, I believe he should be a favourite, but the biggest betting favourite, I believe, in UFC history. I thought that is a little bit
Is that
strong.
True?
I think I may be making that up, but it was a massive.
Was he 2,400, right? It was huge.
Something ridiculous. So it must be up there, at least in the history books. And I remember thinking, even if he is a favourite, and even if he goes and starches him, this is a little bit off, in my opinion. But clearly flipping, not. It was bang on the money. Chris Moutinho, not easy to stop. And it's the same with Cameron Simon as well. Really tough fighter, durable fighter, young fighter who's not been through that many wars as well. So double impressive. And what's interesting about the actual finish itself is,
I know what you're going to say.
That is a pattern of play that I absolutely love. Firstly, I don't know if it would even be called a right hand, just from the way that he set it up. So for those that maybe didn't see it, the way they actually set it up early in the fight was just going to the body with a right kick, going to the body with a right kick. And you can also give this same look to the finishing sequence off the teep, off the right. And I'll come back to that a little bit later in the card, but set up to the body. And then you could see Chris was start to reach for the kick. He started to feel the kick. The hands come a little bit lower. And then the next time he throws that kick, but he feints it, steps through into southpaw, and then boom, check right hand. I absolutely love that sequence. Personally, I like drilling it with an up elbow. There's also like a check elbow that you can step off. You can also create the angle and go knee. You can create the angle, go body kick off the southpaw. So it opens up a lot of opportunities. But he landed that right hand so flush on the perfect angle. From that and last week's knockout with Korean Zombie Jr., that's two of the most...
That might be my favourite knockout this year, that one. Honestly, I've rewatched that so many times. Yeah, I think just on that, and on, I guess this speaks for the Wellmaker finish as well, is at this point, when we've been watching MMA for we're 5 to 7 years, give or take, around the both of us, like religiously. And
4
years, 2021, really? I thought you started in COVID, no?
Yeah, but I just started making content 4 years ago, actually. Okay, yeah, probably about 4 or 5, yeah.
Right. Okay, 4 to 7 years on average between both of us, let's say. And I feel like after a couple of years, that excitement, we've spoken about this before, it does tend to wear off a little bit, the magic of MMA almost. And there's nothing bad to say about it. It's just the reality. You almost get desensitized to violence and these spectacular finishes. So it's so rare when you get a finish, particularly like Zombie Juniors and Malcolm Wellmaker's, perhaps to a lesser extent, but still, where it really just gets you out of your seat, wows you. And those are the knockouts I'm looking for each week. Those are the ones that keep me coming back. It was money. The thing I loved about it, I saw someone break this down, and you did a good job yourself just there, but with that feint where he goes low with the leg kick, Moutinho lifts the leg to almost avoid getting hit with the leg kick. That means he's on 1 foot. He's off balance. That means that right hand is going to do about 3 times as much damage as it would have done compared to how it would have done if he had 2 feet on the ground. And that was real. It's just masterclass. Beautiful. Again, I can't speak to it on a technical sense. It's not my pedigree, but I was thoroughly impressed. It was phenomenal.
Oh, mate, I've started to get so deeply invested into...
I can tell.
The striking game. I always enjoyed it. I always liked listening to it in MMA. Obviously, when I'm in the gym, I'm listening to it from the coaches and whatnot. So I've got very, very direct feedback constantly. And then, as you'll know, when you go back and edit an hour of footage meticulously, you hear the same sound bites back and back and back and back.
Yeah.
So a combination of all of these things is so much information from different ways. And now I'm training more and training with different coaches and following different people. I'm starting to get really, really invested in it. I'm really enjoying it.
I can see the way you're describing it, and the sort of mannerism that you're the way you're talking about it is exactly the same way I would speak about, you know, the gentle art, should I say, jiu-jitsu. You know, I can see the passion that you have for it. It's I know you don't connect with it in the exact same way as you might do with grappling, but you know, I can understand it. I think, like, not just me, a lot of people can relate to that, the excitement of learning more than anything and taking in all that from information. And it's I think it's the satisfaction, the satisfying result of that comes with being able to sort of pass that information. PARSE is the word I'm using there, and understand it, break it down, and then actually apply it. And particularly within striking, I think that's even more prevalent because it's a much more in your face kind of sport. It's very direct, you know, and I think, like, now you have that skill set and the knowledge to be able to break down these fights and these finishes. You know, for me to listen to, it's a privilege, and I think with everyone else as well.
I was debating whether to do this or not, but I'm going to do it anyway because I don't really care. But I was chatting to Eric Nixie last night because I actually heard something in the corner that he was shouting out in the I can't remember his full name. It's not Abdul Rashid. I believe that's a cricketer. Abdul Malik.
Something Malik, yeah.
So in the corner, I heard him call audible, and then I heard him give the feint of So I asked him about that. I said, was that a particular look that you got against this fighter? Is that something he does, or is that something you're trying to pick up more? Because that's a low effort feint. A lot of people talk about feints, but there's actually a lot of different feints. You've got the body, you've got the eyes, you've got level changes, obviously, but then you've also got sonic feints. So if you're striking to a tempo, then if you go and you don't throw the jab, you can interrupt someone's rhythm just through the audible. So it's that's quite interesting in itself, just different ways that people are breaking patterns. But coming back to what I said earlier, this is just a small detail, but it's just on the striking. He's really, really skilled, that Abdul Malik. He is still quite green, and you can see that he needs some more.
8-0.
Yeah, 9-0.
Yeah, not a lot of time in the game.
No, not at all, right? That really is not a lot of time at all, especially in today's market. So you can tell he's a little bit green in some areas, but you can also see how well rounded he is. One mistake that he kept making that would cost him against a better striker is he has a really nice rear teep off the right leg. But the only problem that he makes with that is as he lands it, he always steps through. And he doesn't step through with an intention of throwing something out of the southpaw. He would never throw anything out of the southpaw, and then he would just go back to orthodox, which made me realise that he was actually doing it just because it was a lack of balance off the strike. So really what you want is one of two things there. You want to land the teep and come back to your stance so you're balanced and you can't be countered. Or if you do it intentionally, you can land the teep into southpaw and then you put some output, right? Then you put something in front of that before you get countered. But what he was doing was just stepping through off balance, landing it nicely, but then he was just in southpaw, which is the defensively weaker side, and then he was giving no output and then just going back. And that is a kind of a big, big no-no. And the reason I bring that up is because it goes back to Malcolm Wellmaker, and what makes him so talented is it's those small details within the striking. When he steps through, boom, that right hook is there straight away, right? So he can land in that southpaw stance with damaging techniques and whilst keeping his opponent guessing. And it just made me sort of the knockout and then that performance maybe put one and one together. And I was going to hit up Eric Nixon and say just a couple of details that I saw in this one.
From my your expertise, your expert stance,
he likes things like that.
That comes to mind. Yeah, I'm sure he does. I mean, he's one of the greatest minds in the game right now. Of course, I'm sure he would appreciate that. Again, he
may even see it himself. By the way, he may even see it himself.
I'm sure he does,
and that's very possible. But if he didn't, and it was something that he sort of, that's a nice read. He's very, very humble in where he picks up information from, and he's got no ego. And that's not me to say, I know more than the championship coach. It's just one particular detail I happened to see that maybe they didn't, right? Maybe they didn't. So, yeah.
I think a good example of that kind of fighter, then when you're talking about the stance switching, I just quickly as a sort of mini tangent, Alexander Volkanovski to a T, I think is a guy perfect example of that with those step in flurries he does, where he's constantly switching stance off of the punch and then using that to combo in his next attacks. Yeah, it just came to mind. I thought about that. There was that one flurry he hit against Makhachev in their first fight, which exactly comes to mind, where he forces Makhachev back against the fence using those stance switches and constantly chaining each attack off the rear hand. Yeah, I don't know, that just came to mind.
The reason I say it, and again, this is a lot of the things that I say along these lines are things that are drummed into me whilst I watch the sparring and I'm hearing the feedback from the coaches. And this is something that Ash Grimshaw is always very, very big on, is a lot of people in MMA have a bad habit of stepping into their weaker side, whether it be orthodox or unorthodox, usually unintentionally. But if you are going to do it, and you're going to do it intentionally, then you have to show an attack, right? And the thing with that as well, going back to Abdul Malik, is his opponent, not Cody Durden, sorry, flipping, what's the fella's name? Can't remember. Ambiguous.
Cody Brundage. Was it Cody Brundage?
Yeah, it was. It was. The thing with that is he never once took advantage of him being in southpaw either. So from the opposing side, as soon as you see someone go into their weaker stance, you should be going boom, body kick out of the rear leg, boom, straight right hand down the pipe, because they don't have as many reps seeing the defenses from that side. They're not as comfortable. But he wasn't given any offense. So it's basically saying, okay, here's a free attack to blast a kick against my wrists. Here's a free attack to blast a kick against my body or the inside of the leg. And it was just there so many times. And it's like you said, people like Volkanovski, they don't necessarily have those weaknesses in that stance. But when they do switch into that stance, they give something in front of it so that they're not as receptive to an attack. But sorry, we'll move on from that.
Yeah, but, I mean, no, but that's what it's about, right?
Getting into the weeds of the strike, into the
weeds. I mean, I think it's nice that you're able to offer that angle. I mean, we've spoken about this before. You know, people listen to you specifically. You might not even be an expert in these things, but you're not even you're not even close to a professional. And I don't think you take any offense in saying that, but they value your opinion regardless because of the brand you built. So I feel like there's still something nice in hearing what you have to say regardless of your pedigree or your background, right? And hey, some of the best coaches have never trained or never fought a day in their lives. It's true, and that goes for every sport. So you never know. There's some people have a good mind for the game, but I think we're looking at. Sorry,
just before we move on from that, just because it's a little bit more creator based, I think it's important to actually understand for anyone listening is MMA is a very weird sport where, take you for example, right? You're a good example. You do jiu-jitsu recreationally. You could go to the gym tomorrow, for example, and there be a UFC fighter at the open mat that you train with. That is not the case, or that is not possible in any high-level sport, really. Football, rugby, tennis, golf. You're not just going to the golf range and you're hitting balls with Tiger Woods. Like, it doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. But MMA, that is a lot more possible. And then from a media side of things, it's a lot more viable to go and be at a training session and listen to the coaching. And it's a lot more viable to hit up someone through DMs and ask them something. The world is a lot more interconnected in MMA because it's a lot newer of a sport. So just coming back to you saying about offering that angle, it's also just a case of I have very, very, very experienced people around me, whether it be online that I consume, whether it be me going down to the gym and listening to Brad Pickett or Ash Grimshaw, some of the most experienced people in this country. And I'm just very, very fortunate to pick the brain. So you can kind of cross-reference all of these different things that happen in the cage with all of the different minds outside of it. And then you can kind of filter it through your own process and then kind of create your own image around it. And then just play it off for your own thoughts. Like, I think they should do this or this.
Yeah. Definitely all your handiwork, for sure. But it's a good point you bring up, actually. I mean, because you're right. I was going to say actually that the UFC and MMA specifically, but the UFC has only been around for just over 30 years, and when you're comparing it to any other major sport around the world, I mean, how long has football been around for? Soccer for the Americans, hundreds and hundreds of years, right? Like it's got an esteemed pedigree. Boxing as well. If we're talking more closer to home, boxing has been around for far, far longer. I mean, also an obscene amount of time, and that's why it's got that sort of renown. And I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. It's almost like regarded it's put on a higher pedestal than something like MMA.
Prestige.
And obviously, prestige. That's exactly the word. And MMA obviously will probably gain that title over time. It will just take, again, convincing a whole entire generation of people that it's not a blood sport and it's something to be celebrating and worth admiring. But yeah, I mean, I don't really know the point I was trying to make, but I mean, I guess that the dynamic will change, right? When you're talking about being interconnected with fighters,
Sure.
Being able to train close time with some of the best and the best. I think the sad thing that we'll probably see down the line is things will change in that regard. You'll see the more high level fighters probably enclosed off or treated or put on a pedestal and treated in a different manner. And I guess it's a privilege in a lot of ways, especially in the position you're in, to do what you do, go to a gym and get high level knowledge from high level people week in, week out, some of the best in the country, as you said yourself. That's probably a luxury most people won't get to ever do. So, and I know yours position is a unique one, but anyone can go down to GVTT down in Morden and go pick up that knowledge themselves. They don't have to be in your position as a creator filming week in, week out. They can go and do that. And I hope as a sort of optimistic side of things, we don't lose sight of that. But I think we should, as I did say earlier, go back to just look back at some of the better fights on the card, or the good fights. One that really frustrated me, what was a fun fight, Cody Garbrandt, Raoni Barcelos, who the latter, I have to say, on a crafty little run at the back end of his career.
Yeah,
I mean, being Peyton Talbot and Cody Garbrandt back to back, I mean, that is pretty phenomenal, right? I mean, I heard him calling out Rob Font. You're pointing at the camera. Now I'm scared.
Wellmaker.
What, you want to send him another hot prospect to cull and destroy?
I think it makes a lot of sense, right? When you get two people that have good performances on the same card, same division, and that is the cusp of the top 15. I don't think they want to put Barcelos in the top 15 because end of his career, not really a big name, not the most exciting style. So if he is around that cusp, they kind of have a good narrative then to say, all right, well, Maker, here's one more. Go and do that again, and then boom. And then you've got 4 fights, 4 finishes potentially, top 15. And now you're
and
really
he is hittable. He is hittable. So if you want to set up a potential show-stopping finish for Wellmaker, I mean, there's definitely opportunity, because Cody Garbrandt did crack him and in usual fashion decided to turn the controller off and emote for no reason when he could have probably gone and got the finish. I don't understand why he does it every fight, because 9 times out of 10, it's blown up in his face and he's usually got finished or lost the fight by decision afterwards. So frustrating from him. And I don't want to go down that route of where does he go next, because I don't think Cody Garbrandt's heart has been in the game in terms of championship pedigree for quite a long time now. So I feel like we'd be harping on about the exact same opinions and statements. It is sad to see, though, of course. I will say that at a minimum.
It doesn't look, from my perspective, I could be wrong, it doesn't look like he's one of those fighters he's had a lot of knockouts, right? So it would be easy for him to go in there, look gun shy, look scared to exchange in the pocket, and maybe there's a touch of that, but it doesn't really seem like the case, which is why it's even, for me, a little bit stranger. I understand that you get to the heights of this sport, it's very easy to just fall off that slope. In fact, it's the natural path. But I don't understand how his game has just regressed so much. I'm not saying he's necessarily going to be as on point as he was against Dom Cruz or in the title run going to 10-0, sure, but just some really glaring errors in his game that I feel like, for a veteran and an ex-champion, something that he could modify quite easily. He would just blitz in, okay, nice, but with his feet behind him, his chin in the air, and run in a straight line, like one of those anime sort of character things, which I found strange. Didn't work behind the jab whatsoever. Loads up all of his shots, and he doesn't need to do any of that. Hasn't added any kicks to his game to set up his boxing. Didn't really show any takedown, even if he didn't want it, because Barcelos can grapple. He didn't even show it. So now he's just basically boxing with big telegraphed hooks. And after he's grappled a little bit, after he's thrown a few combinations, he does tire a touch, which is okay, it's natural. But now they're even more telegraphed, and now they're a lot more avoidable. Whereas I feel like if he kept the sort of back foot pressure he was able to get Barcelos on early doors, and he just invested into the body, landed a couple of low kicks, got behind his jab, I think he would have had a really successful night, to be perfectly honest. I don't think Ronnie Barcelos would have had much for him, but it kind of seemed like he was his own worst enemy. I know that's quite critical, but that's kind of what it seemed like.
I think that's a good way of summarizing the latter end of his career. I think maybe he was molded early on, molded into that perfect being. And people always say he was molded in a lab for that, 25-minute period to beat Dominic Cruz that one night
Close
at
fight.
UFC. I'm testing my knowledge here. It's 2-0 something, I think. Oh, it's annoying me. I'm not getting off the top of my head. But something like that. But anyways, he was molded for that exact night and for those 25 minutes. And I think, I don't know what it is. Is it a lack of coachability, a lack of fight IQ, lack of willing to change? Either way, as you said, we're coming from a critical stance here. And I think that's more than fair at this point of his career. 3-7 since losing the belt, I believe, or since he won the title. So that's pretty damning. And he is only 33, I believe. And that obviously that is reaching the back end of your career, especially at the bantamweight weight class, right? You do tend to drop off quicker, especially for a fighter like him who relies on his speed, which tends to be one of the first things to go as you get on with age. But equally, you wouldn't expect that level of drop off. And I feel like the losses he's had, particularly this one, are a result of his own making rather than being technically outclassed. As you said, he could probably have had a good night if he really fought the right way. And he has the skill sets and ability to do so, but he just doesn't.
This is what I'm saying, and I don't want to make it seem as simple as, oh, just go out there and fight the perfect fight. That's not what I'm saying. But when you look at his skill sets and what his best attributes are, they are perfectly aligned to all of these matchups. Like I said, he's a phenomenal boxer and has ridiculous hand speed and is known to be one of the most powerful punchers in bantamweight history, right? He does have legitimate power. So I don't understand why he doesn't do himself a favour and at least try and open up those channels for the knockouts, because more times than not, against anyone really at a decent level, especially in the bantamweight division of the UFC, you're not just going to wing big punches and flipping knock someone out. It's just not really going to happen. So, yeah, I guess, where does he go from here?
Frustrating.
Big name matchups, really, I think, right? Just big name matchups in a bantamweight division.
Who, though? Who? Who could you even chuck him against? Dominic Cruz rematch, but he's retired now, isn't he? So that's not happening.
When I say, all right, well, here's an idea. Not a great idea, actually. That wasn't a great idea. I was going to say Wellmaker again, but loss, win.
Oh,
not a great idea.
No.
Not a great idea.
I've got an idea. And I only say because it's just come to mind because it was also going on last night at the same time or just after. Why not send it to something like Dirty Boxing? Maybe Karate Combat. I quite like the idea of that. Because you're talking about a guy who is very much focused on his hands, hasn't added many kicks to his game or anything like that. Dirty Boxing, I don't know. I like the sound of that. And even at Karate Combat, he could excel. I mean, listen, put it this way, and this is no disrespect to the man, but if Sam Alvey can become Karate Combat's biggest star and biggest name after that losing streak he went on the UFC. Yeah, exactly. And that's not necessarily because the standard is lower. I think it probably is, but not to the extent people say it is. But it's just a unique angle. It's a different experience where some people can just flourish in that environment. Think Mike Perry at bare knuckle, average UFC fighter, but put him in a bare knuckle ring, he'll dog it out with anyone. Yeah. Cody Garbrandt, I feel like could flourish in one of those environments. So I think New Horizons beyond the UFC, that excites me. Bare knuckle, I don't know about him. I don't know if he could hack bare knuckle. I don't know if Cody Garbrandt would do well there. You
only need to land one. So if he's first, then it might just be a quick.
If he's first, that's a big. I mean, if you said that 5 years ago, I probably would agree with you. He's just not the same guy, is he? I don't know. It does excite me. That excites me far more than any UFC fight ever could. Like, why not? And listen, we know that these rival promotions are, always looking to sign, UFC talent who maybe past it but have the good name value
Cool.
sustained. Cody Garbrandt is exactly one of those. So why not? Dana Brown, President Awesome, make the phone call. Try and get it. Because honestly, I think that could happen. It might not happen now, but it definitely will. 100%, he'll be out of the UFC pretty soon, looking for a new challenge.
Well, discussing new challenges, the one that we was meant to have a long time ago, Jamal Hill and Khalil Roundtree, was actually a matchup I was actually a bit upset to lose, to be perfectly honest. So I am glad that they rebooked this, because you look at the light heavyweight division, there's not a million good matchups you can make. It's just starting to bubble along a little bit better than it was maybe a couple of years ago, but there's not many good matchups.
It's never been that great of a weight class, has it? Really hasn't.
Are you joking? It used to be the premier weight class.
I mean, for the last 5-6 years, I think it's been bang average.
Yeah. Honestly, course.
I mean, when Jones was helming with the belt, come on, boring. There's nothing going on there. Let's be real. Yeah. Last couple of years, it got a bit better, and then I feel like it's regressed again. I think obviously Alex Pereira sustained that upwards trajectory perhaps for a little bit, but he's gone now.
I don't know. I think now you've got a win streak, Dom Reyes. You've got
true.
Ankalaev at the top of the tree, which has just refreshed it a touch. Even though he's not active, it at least provides new matchups, right? To a certain degree. I think Jalton.
If I see him on a pay-per-view, I can't be arsed, mate. I'm gonna be honest with you. Do you know what I'm saying?
I don't think they'll do that.
Then that's Ankalaev on a pay-per-view. I'm like, for fuck's sake. Do you know really? You know what I'm saying?
I don't think they'll do that at all, to be perfectly honest.
Not headline. You don't think so?
No, I don't think that's gonna do anything.
Unless
for
Alex
an
Pereira
American market.
does the rematch. That's the only avenue. And even he has to be. If Alex Pereira's fighting, he's headlining. I think that's not even up for debate.
Potentially. Who else is on that Baku card? Because it is a little bit in contention at the moment whether or not that actually goes ahead, like you said, because of all the dramas in the
political drama.
Yeah.
I mean, as I said before we punched record, I really do hope it does go ahead, because this card for a fight night is absolutely stacked to the gills, and plenty of big names on there. And we're talking about Usman. He's actually opening the card. I'm not going to touch on this fight because I'm not particularly interested, but his brother is actually opening the prelims, which is something to look out for. One that really sticks out to me, I mean, if we're going up, the co-main event, that's my fight of the night. I think it's most people's fight of the night. Sorry, you had something you just wanted to interject there. No?
I was just going to guess the one that jumped out of the page to you.
Please.
Ignacio Bahamondes versus Rafael Fiziev.
Reading my mind. I mean, why would it not be that? It should be everyone's fight of the night. It's everyone's people's main event, because those two are... I want to... It doesn't even sound like a generalization to say this. I think they are the new blood of the division. You know? I mean, particularly within the lighter weight class, with the lightweight weight class, apologies, that top 5 is starting to edge out now, but they've always been the old guard, and credit to them. You know, they've kind of broken that old trend of old fighters being pushed out and phased out unceremoniously. They've just stayed in there and lingered.
Yeah.
Dustin Poirier is probably the best example of that. And we're finally starting to see that tip over. Justin Gaethje, another name. And I know Gaethje ironically has just beaten Fiziev. It won't take long, a year or two, which I guess speaks to how impressive their resumes and skill sets are. But if we're talking about two men who could lead the line for this top 5 for quite a long time, I think Fiziev and Bahamondes are all of that put together. And I'm almost sad they're facing each other now, because I think you give this a couple of years down the line, very easily this could be a matchup for a belt at some point. I think they are both phenomenal. Bahamondes he keeps impressing me every time he steps into the cage. Is it Jalen Turner? Was it a triangle? He got over Jalen Turner in his last fight, or did he submit him? I mean, that just speaks to how multifaceted he is. Because I think, was it that spinning back kick he landed that went viral? I mean, that still is ingrained. There you go, against Roosevelt Roberts, show-stopping in like the last minute of the fight. That one knockout of the year, I'm pretty sure, again, lit up the social media sphere, and it was one of those rare knockouts which broke out of the mainstream MMA and into literally a wider sporting realm, which is very difficult to do in MMA. Last night to Joaquin Buckley, probably another good example of that. And when you have a guy who can do that and then also whip out a triangle choke over Jalen Turner on a whim, I mean, you need that skill set at lightweight to really succeed because it is the most stacked weight class historically in the UFC. And I do worry that it might Rafa Aziz might be too much for him. He's one of my favorite fighters in the UFC because every punch and every kick he throws with absolute venom and 200%. He's throwing to absolutely murder you. That body kick from that, he has that proper Muay Thai stance. He trains out of Thailand frequently. Venomous. Honestly, probably my favorite shot in the UFC is that proper right body kick he throws. It's just brutal. And I just want an absolute war. That might sound a bit psychotic, but it's what I want to see. I think it's what a lot of people want to see. And I can't even give you a winner because it's one of those fights where it's just fire meets fire. Unstoppable force versus immovable object. And I'm very, very excited. It is the co-main event of UFC Baku.
I was actually pretty excited when he said he was, or at least there were rumors that he was going to go down to featherweight, because then I started matchmaking featherweight fights for Rafael Fiziev and realized I loved all of them, because you can't take that man down. You just cannot. He's got a very, very similar sort of...
I will say, just to interject, I have to say, Justin Gaethje did do it in that first fight. He did, actually. His only takedown in the UFC, I believe.
He did. And I'm not discrediting that takedown, but I think that speaks to more of the fact it probably caught him off guard than it was a deficiency in takedown ability. And he no damage, gets back to his feet, right? So it's very, very hard man to keep down. So it's just hard to get to his hips. He's very compact. He's quite short for the division, and you have to go through the traffic, which is his knees, his kicks, his uppercuts, his striking is just very, very nasty. So you have to actually see a lot of different dangerous techniques to get to the hips, and then they're very, very quick and strong anyway. So it's difficult to do. I can just kind of see a world in where Fiziev's coming over the top with big hooks, over the top of Barramundez's punches, who's probably going to be punching down a touch just with that height range. And you do see Fiziev, he does like to sort of Mike Tyson hook over the top sometimes, step through a big kick. So, yeah, I think that will be a really fun fight. And actually, it's a massive, massive fight for Fiziev because he does need that show-stopping finish to really say, I am the new Justin Gaethje, right? Because that's kind of what he's been built as. That's kind of his vibe, his style. And he's going into his hometown with a matchup like this. There's a lot on the line for this fight, to be honest, at 155. So I'm actually really looking forward to this. Barramundez was, funnily enough, one of, if not the first ever person I did a portfolio breakdown on my YouTube 3 or 4 years ago.
That.
Yeah. And I remember
Visionary.
just looking. Yeah, exactly. I remember some of the ones don't pan out quite how you think. And then
don't talk about those. Oh, I've got a good example of that. I did when one of my first videos was I did a video talking about prospects in the UFC. Oh, who did I mention? Oh no, I know now. I remember one of them was bad. And the only reason I said this name, because I did one for every weight class, the only reason I said this name is because genuinely at the time there wasn't really any coming out of the heavyweight division. And I did say a man I actually just mentioned earlier was Mohammed Usman, which has not panned out well at all. But it was in my defense, as I said, not a lot to choose from there. And I think there was another bad one in there, but we don't need to. I'm scared to remember what it was.
I had a couple of belters.
To be fair. Yeah. I had Carlos Olberg, I mentioned back then. I was pretty proud of that one.
I had Paddy Pimblett.
Yeah, I mean, well, at what point? When did you jump that one?
Before he was in the UFC.
Okay, that's good. I can respect that because I feel like there was at a point where almost he had that when he joined the UFC for the first time, right before his debut. He had that almost like cultural push behind it where people just expected him to be very good. So he was on everyone's lips, if that makes any sense.
I don't think that he was a big brand and he was doing exciting things. The general consensus was not he was going to be a world beater. That was not the general consensus.
Okay, to be fair, I didn't think that either.
Yeah, it was. That was not the vibe. It wasn't the. I've been saying that for years. I haven't.
I don't know what led you to that opinion. I'm not mocking you for it in the slightest. I can't see that because for me, the point came not within the Tony Ferguson fight because I think there was still a lot of vulnerability shown there. I think the Bobby Green performance cemented it for me 100% that he'd leveled up massively. And from then on, I said 100% he could fight and potentially win a world title. I struggle to see where outside of his offensive jiu-jitsu you would see Paddy Pimblett as title caliber before he made this UFC debut.
I think with some fighters, you look just at the skill set, right? So you just look at how their technique is and their IQ and their decision making before they get into the UFC, right? And then some people say, oh, he's going to go on to great things. And Paddy was very talented. But the thing for me, and obviously it's MMA, so you can still be wrong. But the reason why I did think this back in the day is the intangibles. Firstly, people forget how experienced he is. He started competing professionally at 16. So he's been in this game for a very, very long time, right? Very long time. Then he also was exposed to extreme fame from a very young age in Liverpool. So he's also lived that lifestyle. He's gone through that time of when it got to his head and he was going out and he was the man and he was kind of loving it and his ego's inflated. He's been through that. He lived it. Okay, I know that's not going to happen in the UFC for the first time and that's going to derail him. Then he has an enormous brand, right? Enormous brand. And it's very favourable for the UFC. He's got an accent. He's got funny hair. He's from the UK. Is just absolutely perfect, right? Really, really, really good marketing spin. So therefore, I know the UFC are going to want to give him good matchups and they're going to want to plan his career accordingly, which is a major point. Before he got into the UFC, or just as he got into the UFC, I said two names. I said Tony Ferguson and Conor McGregor. He's going to fight these people. And everyone just laughed at me, bearing in mind that Tony Ferguson is like title contention at this point and whatnot.
El Cucuy in his prime.
Yeah, people were just laughing me down, right? But so it was more so the intangibles. And then, of course, very skilled. Jiu-jitsu, off the charts. All of that. I actually saw a few things in his striking, which didn't look the most refined, but certainly effective. In that video, I mentioned about the kicks, a lot of the kicks, and a lot of the dexterity he has in his kicks. But outside of that, the ability to perform and unwavering confidence. Unwavering confidence. So with all of those things factored in, I thought he's going to go on to very big things. And the last thing I'll say on that is when everyone said, oh, he'd lose against this person or this would happen to him or this, I'd say, okay, they're all fair. There may all be very relevant points. But there's a certain amount of leeway you have to give someone until they lose. That's what I always think. I think it's like, it's fair to have criticisms and like holes in their game. Sure, like that's always going to be the case. But also, if someone says that they're going to be the best in the world and they have this unwavering confidence and no one's proved them wrong as of yet, you have to give them some benefit of the doubt, even if it's 5% or 2%. You have to give them some. So that was the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, you can't fault results, right? At the end of the day, if they ain't lost, and people forget. Yes, he had the fight against Jared Gordon, which I think you could very much argue, make the case for, and I'm sure you probably would as well. Would? No, come on. What are we doing here? What do you mean? What does that mean? Are you just trying to? You're poking the bear with that one. What does that mean? I think it was most impressive performance.
I think it was one of his most impressive performances.
Come on. In what way? He should have lost. And I have great respect for him, but he should have lost that fight.
But that's exactly my point. Now I'm structuring that sentence in a way that's going to provoke emotion, but I believe it to a certain extent. If you want to talk about best performances, then okay, sure, his most recent performance against Michael Chandler is probably his best one. But if you want to look more holistically,
there it is.
How good has Jared Gordon been in his last 10 fights in the UFC lightweight division? First and foremost, let's look at that. He's been incredible. There's an argument to be made that he should be on a 6-fight winning streak. He's very, very good. Just had a very good performance as well. Paddy Pimblett goes out and shatters his foot in the first kick he throws in that fight and still manages to get his hand raised after 15 minutes without being able to do really anything that he's good at for the most part. I find that very impressive. I don't think it looks great. I don't think he won by a landslide. I don't think it's going to be good for the critics online. But from the ability to just get your hand raised, which is the most important thing in MMA.
Sure.
That was very impressive to me. And again, continues momentum. There are some people in this game who just have the knack to win. Mohammed Makayev is a very good example who fought this weekend. They just have the ability to win. And that's why I was very impressed with that performance. Not because it looked the most dominant or impressive.
Yeah. You're speaking on Makayev, actually. I only say it because I've just got my ancient script from 2023 on my prospects list. So I'm more curiosity to see who was on there. And Mohammed Makayev was the very first name. But I feel like that one was a bit of an open goal. I'm not going to give myself too much credit for that one. And the reason I definitely won't is because for bantamweight, I said the obvious pick was Usman Magomedov, which of course has proven obviously to be well. But I ended up going for a left field pick, which has absolutely blown up in my face. But to my credit, or in my defense, should I say, he was riding a 5-fight knockout streak in a row. And that was Adrian Yanez at bantamweight, which is not, I know, isn't that crazy? I mean, he went on he's kind of like Cody Garbrandt in a lot of ways. He's a man who's just very boxing heavy and little else. And it's kind of been the result of his downfall. Featherweight, I kind of went on a technicality and said Nathaniel Wood as a sort of half joke, but also was to some credit to that. And jury is very much still out on it. But how many wins in a row is it for Nathaniel? That Morgan Sheree win. Is that two?
He needs
two
to
or
get
three?
a fight. I think it's 2 in a row.
Yeah, it's been a while now.
After Abu Dhabi, which was Mohammed Namath, they lost. I think he was on a 4-fight win streak or something before that. And then lost to Namath. And then he
should have won that really as well.
But he won in Manchester and then he won in London as well. So I think it's 2 or 3.
He's won 5 of his last 6. He was on a 3-fight winning streak. Then he lost to Namath, which he really should have won. And now he's won his last 2. So, and you're right. I mean, you obviously are in the know to an extent. So any fight news that you could speak of or rumors of? Because it has been a while. March 22nd, 2025. So not a huge amount of time, but we're starting to approach that time where he's at this point in his career where he needs to be active. He needs to really making that title push now. So he needs a fight. And again, you probably know more than I do, but anything you can drop?
He's looking for one, and he wants. I think at this point, he just kind of wants someone that's going to give him a little bit of a acceleration, right? Like you said, he wants activity, but also he kind of needs a dance partner with a bit of a name as well. And I feel like he's at a point in his career where he kind of
never had that, has he?
To be honest.
He's never had it. That's what I've always thought about Nathaniel. He's never had that big name value fight for some reason. I mean, he had John Dodson back in the day when he was riding his first streak in the UFC, but we're talking about mainstream names. John Dodson doesn't fit that bill. Perhaps in skill set he did. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there isn't a lot. I mean, Morgan Sheree was a really, really good win. He was very highly touted. And as you said, he deserves it more than anything. So who would you match him up with at that featherweight? I think it's got to be a ranked fight, surely.
In my opinion, either just outside of the rankings, or if you're going to go into the rankings, there's just so many fun fights there that you
David
could
Onama.
make.
David Onama. Run that one for me. That's a banger.
I think you've got the likes of David Onama and whatnot outside of the rankings, and then if you look at the bottom of the rankings,
mate. He's in.
Oh really?
He's 13th. Yeah, I just got him up now.
You got David Onama, you've got Calvin Cater, you've got Dan Ige, you've got the likes of
those are 13, 14, and 15th actually. So there you go.
Well, there you go.
Makes perfect sense.
If you go out just outside of that, there's some fun matchups as well. But the reason I find it kind of weird is the UFC look after him. Like, he's on a good contract. And when you're on a good contract, they usually want to give you names which are going to be relatively big because it makes financial sense, right? To get the most out of you to fight the bigger guys. But I don't know if it's just a timeline issue because I know he's just having another kid.
Of course.
So it's kind of a lot of these is timeline problems. But yeah, not really heard anything back. Or there's a name I don't really know if I'm allowed to say. I'll tell you after, but not too exciting. So yeah, I'm not really too sure what's next, but hopefully
something good.
Name. Yeah, obviously Long's got his fight coming up in Shanghai, which I'll be going to.
Charles Johnson. He's really if anything, he's like the direct opposite, right? Really getting pushed fast. And I can almost understand that because we talked earlier about being a new age, new blood fighters like Bahamondes and Fiziev. Kavanagh is that to a far greater extent. He's got far much more youth on his side. And we're talking about the maturity of his skill set at that age. It's like unparalleled. So I can understand why the UFC are pushing him early, especially the fact that he has that talent at flyweight and the knockout power. I mean, there's a lot of boxes being ticked for the UFC in their mindset. Okay, we want to push this guy. So I can actually understand it
Mate,
a lot. Very exciting.
What I find kind of strange is kind of linking the two together is Nathaniel also spins the London angle, the UK angle, has a really cult following, to be perfectly honest, as well, which I learned the last couple of years, and which kind of not caught me off guard, but I didn't really realize as much. So it's kind of weird that they don't want to sort of push a little bit more of that sort of British look. But with Lon, obviously, the reason that it kind of tees up nicely in the marketing is he's got the Chinese angle, right? So he wears the Chinese flag. So he's going out to Shanghai. He's got the British and the Chinese pool. And also a big point that we have to mention, the divisions. The flyweight division is always a little bit more scarce than the other ones in regards to talent and brands. So again, it sort of makes sense. And you look at the flyweight division at flipping Joshua Van, you go and look at what he's doing at the moment, and he's laying out a very nice blueprint. Because a lot of people have been speaking about him, and a lot of the sort of hipsters in MMA have been talking about that Joshua Van, Lonnie Kavanagh matchup eventually down the line. But looking at the matchup with Charles Johnson, I won't go into it too much, but that's a flipping tough test. That's a tough test. He's fought the very best at flyweight. He's very active, very well conditioned. No one has finished him. And that is not an easy assignment, crazy, isn't it? Whatsoever. Yeah.
I do remember vividly Mohamed Mokaev actually going up against him. And obviously Mokaev won fairly convincingly, but it was just a lot of, I'm going to take you down. He just kept getting back up. And it wasn't a particularly inspiring performance, but that was largely in part due to the fact that Charles Johnson is one of the most durable guys in not even just in the division, in the whole roster. I think the only thing to criticize him for is, if he still has it, that absolutely horrendous haircut. He's got a skullet, hasn't he? I believe it is a skullet, which a lot of people in my stream chat have been campaigning for me to get, which you will never see unless I probably hit 10 million subscribers.
I just believe the hole in Charles Johnson's game, he's very skilled and not an easy assignment, but it's what I said to Lon the other day. This is what I said to the coaches as well, and they obviously thought the same thing. If you want to go for the belt within a 2-year time frame, you have to beat these people. So yeah, it's a tough matchup, but are you good or not? You know, it's kind of like the question is
the greats rise to the occasion, isn't it? This is you talk about fast 100%. Track. I'm excited for it because if they're good enough, they will win. Ilia Topuria was an example of that, and I think Lonnie Kavanagh can absolutely be that too, 100%.
Got the sign off from Ilia Topuria on Joe Rogan as well, which is pretty cool. Obviously, the same management. You didn't know that? Have you not seen that?
No, I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
No, sorry. No, I did. Yes, you're right. I did. I watched the episode. Yes, I remember that sticking out to me, actually. Sorry, I thought you were talking about managers. I was like, I thought there was like you were talking about a conversation between them. No, you're right. I did listen to that episode. Yeah, I mean, that speaks volumes. Greats recognize other greats, right? Or what does Conor McGregor say? Gods recognize gods or something. I mean, that's a bit more. I just think along those lines.
I think when you have people that have not just an eye for the sport, I don't think it's that, but when you have people, either fans or fighters or managers or coaches, whatever it may be, that have an interest on a different level in regards to this game, whenever they watch him, they always are fans, because there's just a skill set that you have to appreciate. It's as simple as that. I always tell the story about when we're warming up. Well, I'm not warming up, he's warming up, but backstage for his debut, I just remember the whole room of fighters and coaches and cornermen just kind of looking over their shoulder whilst he's hitting pads. It's just flipping crisp and sharp and loud and powerful. And you don't really see flyweights hit like that at all. And then even with Nathaniel, and this isn't just because obviously I know these people, it's kind of just on the technicality of their skills, and obviously I get to see it more, but the boxing is just very, very sharp and the kicks are very, very devastating. So It's an exciting time for both of these guys. They're obviously at different points in their career, but yeah, I'm excited to see what's next for them both.
So am I. And I think that's probably a nice little place to wrap up this episode of the MMA Creators Podcast, episode number 107. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next week. Have a good one.